Hey everyone, it's AZ, and I am back for episode 65 of the Fire Rescue Wellness podcast, where I interviewed Cassandra Kwon and Meredith McQuerry. These innovative ladies are involved in research in textiles, specifically in our bunker gear. So we had a great conversation. A lot of it was driven by the fact that female gear isn't widely available. Females may not even know that it's available at all. And the bottom line is no one's gear fits them very well. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation. Call to action for you today. If you like the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you'd give me a rating and a review on whatever platform you listen. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey podcast listeners, it's AZ, and today I have two very special guests. I'm very excited about having these ladies on the podcast. I want to introduce you to Meredith McQuerry and Cassandra Kwon. Ladies, say hello to the podcast listeners.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, hi.
So, as usual, when I have two guests, I start out a little bit different. I don't do the rapid fire, bright, shiny spotlight questions. We do things a little bit different. So, Cassandra, I'm going to start with you, and I want to give you a chance to tell the listeners just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
My name is Cassandra Kwon, and I am a research assistant professor at North Carolina State University. I have been with the university, I should have thought about the math here, since 2014, let's just say, when I started my postdoc there. And I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity in sort of the protective textile space, and found that I really enjoyed it, and was really most interested in being able to talk with the various end users who use a lot of the protective textiles, whether that be firefighters, DoD, first responders, that whole group. And I've just sort of have kept up with it. I mean, my research is mainly in sort of functional protective textiles, product development, and prototyping. And so, and that's actually where I met Meredith as well, and where we kind of started our friendship, relationship, journey together. The whole thing. It all started from there. So happy that we're still close colleagues and friends.
Well, I'm happy too, and I'm so excited to have you both. And you said a word, functional, which we're going to come back to in a little bit after I give Ms. Meredith a chance to tell us about herself.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks again for having us. So I guess my first interaction really with firefighting PPE was way back in 2010. So I discovered this class called Textiles and realized I really had a passion for it and loved it. And like Cassandra, was given some opportunities that I took advantage of, and did a study on the durability and the 10-year wear life of structural firefighting PPE that's in the NFPA standards. And then realized, I really love this research part, and I also love to teach, and you can go be a professor and make a career out of that. And that's where I met Cassandra at NC State, and she had just finished her Ph.D. as I was beginning mine. She started as a postdoc. We even got to share an office for a while, which is really what sparked our interest and idea, that now a decade later, this project is taken off, been completed, and we're continuing on for female firefighters. And we started noticing, where are the women? we're always researching firefighters, but we know they're not all men. Where are the women? So, yeah.
Well, and to your point, in all research, we have to question, where are the women? Mm-hmm. Abby Smith-Ryan at UNC Chapel Hill is starting to really give a call to action to researchers like, hey, you have to include women in your studies, you have to include women in your sample groups. But in the fire career, it's tough because it's like 5% of us nationally. There just aren't a lot of us.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep it here with you, Meredith. Until I met you virtually about a year ago, I didn't even realize you could have a PhD in textiles. So just riff on that a little bit. Tell the listeners what in the heck that even involves and the things that you study and look into and research.
Sure. I mean, a lot of times at various universities, you'll find a textiles course tucked away in a variety of different degree programs. Mine happened to be formally titled Merchandising, Apparel, and Textiles. I know at NC State they have fashion design, they have fiber science, textile engineering, all kinds of things that you might find it under. At FSU, where I'm currently an associate professor, ours is retail entrepreneurship. So it's always kind of tucked away and hidden in there. But it's everything from like, what are the fibers we wear? Cotton, polyester, nylon, or in firefighting, your Nomex, your Kevlar, your Aramids, right? Your PBI, those kinds of things. And so we study that from the fiber level through the yarn, the fabric, the finishes that are applied, the ultimate cut and sew operation. And so various programs provide sort of different foundations for that. Some are more business focused, some are more design focused, some are product development focused. And, I've been able to dabble in a little bit of all of that, but my greatest, I guess, strength and focus in my education was really around the science of it. So the science behind textiles, the product development, as Cassandra mentioned, the functional apparel type avenue is really what was of interest to me. And firefighting, I always get asked, what's your connection to the fire service? Is your dad a firefighter, your brother? I didn't have any personal connection. Now I feel like I do, because I know a lot of members of the fire service and they're really important to me. And it's been a blessing, honestly, to work with this end user group. And it's my favorite end user group to work with. So
shh, don't tell the cops. Okay, well, Cassandra, I am going to turn the mic over to you for a second, because Meredith mentioned all these different fiber types, the Nomex, the Kevlar, all of those things. Can you give us just maybe the 30,000 foot view of why all these things are even in our fire gear in the first place?
Oof.
Oof.
Well, I only do that because I know that there's a lot, should I say, controversy right now with what's in fire gear.
Sure is.
And so I'm gonna, again, let's just make that, maybe a 50,000.
We can even go 100,000. Like, we can go to Mars if you want. Just the really high view.
But yes, so all of the fiber types that Meredith has mentioned, they all have inherent characteristics and qualities that make them an excellent fiber to use in turnout suits, because they are able to protect the wearer against radiant and direct heat and flame from fire. And at the end of the day, when you are on a job and you're going to encounter these hazards, that's what your line of defense is. And so, there's been a lot of research, and currently on sort of what that means long-term for the wearer, and what it means if, firefighters, and also, just a side note, we're learning it goes beyond firefighters who are actually wearing this protective gear as well. Like, arson investigators are also having to don PPE, after the fact, in order to protect themselves as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, when you look at the science of it, they have inherent qualities that make them an excellent choice for fabrication for your turnout suit. Now, obviously, that's only one piece of sort of the puzzle, because you have to also think about the design and the mobility and the durability, and those often are addressed separately from the actual material itself. And so that's why it's really important when you do product development that you're not just focusing on the material. You have to look at it like holistically as an ensemble. And so that's why, in research, I always think of material testing as sort of just a down selection process. It's only, it's one of the very first steps that you're going to take in, a line of many steps until you get a good end product. And so I don't know. Is that good enough in terms of
No.
the viewpoint? I don't want to I could probably continue on about the developmental process because, even now with Meredith and our research, we very much see it as something very preliminary. Even though we're, studying, current turnout suits on the market and the anthropometric data, again, that's only one part of it. And obviously it all needs to come together in order to, create something that actually works and that fits and that is, great for the end user. But yeah, when you look at the actual nitty gritty fiber science part of it, and you look at just the materials, it's because those are the fibers that have been identified that can hold up and basically are usable in turnout gear.
Well, and it's funny, I always explain, we have tours at the firehouse and little kids come and they want to touch our gear and they want to put it on. And I always explain it like this. We wear the equivalent of a human pot holder for the most part, and the comfort level is the same. So what I heard from you is that there are long-term consequences, both known and unknown, from wearing fire gear, but in the short term, it's protecting us. And we can kind of put that aside because, like you mentioned, there is a lot of controversy right now. But let's stay with you for a second and let's explore the long-term consequences of wearing fire gear from a physical standpoint, meaning from being able to move your joints, being able to crawl, sit, stand, all of the things that you need to do in that fire gear. Can you kind of talk just a little bit about the things we need to think about when we're sizing, designing, and measuring for that gear, if that makes sense? That's a lot.
Yeah, no. Well, a lot of the things I think for me, and I don't know for Meredith too, it's been eye-opening to say the least, because like Meredith said, we don't wear this fire gear. We're not the ones in the turnout suits day in, day out, potentially hours. And if you're a wildland firefighter, days, weeks. So a lot of the information that we collect, the data that we're collecting, it's a lot of it's from the end user. And so for us, it was very much when we started this research project, our focus was, hey, there's not a lot of science data around the ill-fitting PPE that female firefighters are wearing. We've all heard it many times anecdotally, but we haven't been able to be systematic with gathering that data. So for us, it was really important to make sure that we had the right methodology in getting this data out and presenting it to the community, not only for the fire service community, but for the science community, right? So for us, looking at measurements, anthropometric data was really sort of groundbreaking. The fact that a database like that didn't even exist ever for that, and I mean, we were recently talking to somebody that kind of still wanted to generalize the female population and use that as data for the science or fire community. And we're like, I don't think that's the best approach. In fact, we know that's not the best approach. So, for us, it's really important that we're doing it right. I think, and I think Meredith will very much agree, because our goal is to help inform manufacturers and various fire departments about what we find. And so the things that I've been hearing from, and Meredith's been hearing from the end user group, it's a lot of it is things that when we kind of question them in focus groups, it was surprising because a lot of the things that they brought up, it was things that they were sort of like, wow, I never thought about how my PPE was affecting the way I stepped onto the truck. because we asked, we're like, hey, what things are you doing? What's your approach when you're wearing something oversized or that's something that doesn't fit? What are you doing? What is it? Because also in that question, we're like, okay, we're pinpointing the jacket's not right. So that's why they're, having to pull up their sleeves constantly, or why they're not wearing the gauntlet, the inner cuff for their turnout suit, because if they do that, they lose dexterity in their hand. So they're just all together, not even putting it on. Same thing with the pant, so many female firefighters, again, were like, one I remember saying she tripped and fell and she wasn't even thinking that it was because her suit was too big or that her boots were not fitting properly. She was like, I'm now just realizing that it was probably because of that. She just thought she was being clumsy. And, and so it's these little pieces of information where we're like, wow, if you continue to wear your suit that's not fitting you, your chances of getting injured on job are increasing, right? If you don't fix that problem that your pant is too long and it keeps getting caught under your boot, and that's why you're tripping or stumbling or falling, that's a higher risk, down the line. I mean, who knows when it's going to happen? But, I think the biggest thing too was, another woman was like, every time I have to step on the truck, she's like, I have to hike up my turnout pants all the time. She's like, I have to bring them up physically 2 hands before I get on the truck. And she's like, again, I wasn't thinking about it. It's just comes to second nature to me because I have to do it all the time. But she's like, yeah, I'm having to do that while my male counterparts aren't. So it's, I think the fact that they have to still wear their gear and have been doing it for so long, and then they get a new set, and not to say that, hopefully the fire departments are helping them get a set that fits them, but just, I mean, to me, it's almost like they're just going to just get the same set that they've had in the same size, and then it's just going to continue on and on. Yeah. Sorry, I just talked for a long time, but
no, and my audience is not able to see us, but I was doing the hallelujah signs and the praise be, because right before I met Meredith, I had been invited to a female Facebook group, female firefighter Facebook group, which I didn't ultimately join, but as an invitee, I could see some of the posts. And one of the posts was like, ha ha ha, girls, are you clumsy too? I fall down at every fire. And why are we so clumsy? And everyone was, 40 or 50 comments, me too, me too, me too. Mm-hmm. And then the turd in the punch bowl, me, comments, hey, guys, you're not clumsy. Your shit doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And everyone's like, whoa. So let's explore that with Meredith.
Yeah.
Why is it when the gear distributor person comes and measures me, and he measures my male counterpart and my sleeve length and my chest and my waist, not to mention, though, they're afraid to touch your chest, so they never accurately measure that. But why does my male counterpart get decently fitting gear from those measurements and my shit doesn't fit? Go down the path. Tell us more.
Yeah, honestly, that's the crux of it, right? And I'll tell you a little bit about what Cassandra and I found too, but the main issue is that for a very long time, firefighting gear was only ever made for men, right? There weren't women in the fire service. Okay, women come along, the market share increases. We work with a lot of different manufacturers, and we invited every structural modeling manufacturing company in the U.S. who wanted to participate in our last study. And we had about 7 total. Some did structural, some did wildland, some did both, but we did focus groups with them. And we find that some are really not only getting it, but they're moving the needle and towards a progress for women in the fire service and properly fitting PPE. And what it really comes down to, for those that aren't, it could be a profitability struggle from, and I hate this and I don't justify it, but it's something I've heard for a decade, is market share, which I think is, quite frankly, a bullshit excuse, because your 1.1 million career, that's the last NFPA stat, 1.1 million career and volunteer U.S. firefighters. And we know some of the latest statistics, including volunteers, up to 11% are women. So you're looking at about 100,000 female firefighters. I'm sorry, you've got market share, right? Mm-hmm. And to do it right. So some are doing it. And to their credit, as Cassandra just mentioned, they were doing the best they could because it is 2023. And for the first time ever, we have published anthropometric data on the female firefighter population. And as she mentioned, we were actually at an international conference recently, and we did our presentation. You know, we feel like we're a bunch of badasses up there
rock stars.
And you know, of course, no offense to the men, but you know, a man raises his hand and is like, well, this really seems like a waste because you could have just used female population data. And it's like, you just missed the whole point, right? Military studies have shown that women in the military have very different anthropometrics than the general female population, right? So we, you know, we've been able to show, and we're confident that that's the case in the fire service as well. And so what it comes down to is because those manufacturers and those designers, they didn't have the right data to begin with. So the patterns that you start out with, and this is really more so Cassandra's wheelhouse than mine, but the patterns that you start out with are already a failure, right? Because you're trying to fit a woman into a man's box, right? I have an excellent image, and I can send it to you if you want to share it, you know, anywhere. But it's from a study I did a few years ago, and I looked at male versus female PPE fit. So I did body scans with the gear on. Like Cassandra said, we like to look at the full systems ensemble. So I had the SCBA on, the helmet, the hood, all the stuff, right? And then I measured their ergonomics, just static range of motion, simple movements like, can you reach your arms above your head? Like if you're going to do overhaul. Can you bend over and touch your toes, right? Can you do a squat? Those kinds of things. And we measured the difference in the range of motion with and without the gear and all those ensemble elements on. But I have these body scans and these like cloud point data I can share with you. And it's amazing because you can see, right, like the typical triangular shape of a man, and you see the hourglass figure of one of the female participants. Then I put their gear on. You can still see that need to fit that shape even with the gear on, and it doesn't. And that's number one. That can be the number one problem. Now, the NFPA standards do technically state that manufacturers have to have separate patterns for male versus female. So if they're going to market a woman's turnout suit, they are supposed to be using a different pattern. Our research and data collection so far says maybe that's happening, maybe that's not. But then you have the sizing requirements, right? Like you just mentioned, sleeve length, chest, waist, and inseam. We have 4 measurements, and we think we're going to accurately fit people. That's the first problem, right? So it's a complex issue, right? It's not just one thing solves it all. We also, through our talking with manufacturers, determined that, you know, some are using the distributors or sales reps that come. Some are not trained properly. They don't know how to do hand measurements. Mm-hmm. Some manufacturers think that custom sizing is going to equate to an equal fit for all or a good fit for all, right? And simply, you know, I say this all the time in our presentations, you know, simply shortening the sleeve length like they've done in the standards for a woman and the pant length isn't going to work. I'm 6 feet tall. That certainly would not work for me, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really about the proportion. It's about the body shape. And that's a whole other discussion we've had with many manufacturers and many end users throughout this is, you know, is it a male-female sex thing, or is it a body shape thing? We've heard from manufacturers who say, we have departments who actually, they, unbeknownst to them, they liked the women's cut gear better. They placed an order for it. Soon as they found out it had an F on it for female, canceled the order, right? So it's really, it really, should we be approaching it from a body shape sizing as opposed to gender-based sizing, you know? So you can get into a lot of things there, but that's the crux of it.
Well, and admittedly, I don't think fire gear fits anyone great. So right. The men out there right now that are going, yeah, but what about me? I hear you, but at least the patterns, as the ladies mentioned, at least the patterns that the gear is being built for is closer. So, so many more questions. But first, a small story. I recently did, it's probably a year ago now, an out-of-town training with another department. And neither my boots nor my turnout gear fit. They never have fit. They're male boots, male turnout gear. The gussets, where my knee is supposed to bend, are above my knee. So I can't bend my knee. I walk like a toddler. And the boots don't fit me. They're far too wide. They just don't fit. So I shuffle. This is how I do not fall. I shuffle. And the chief from that department is like, pick up your feet, stop shuffling. And it took everything in my power not to say, my shit doesn't fit. Yes. So, Cassandra, an interesting thing that came up while Meredith was talking, many female items, female personal care items, hygiene items, wallets versus handbags, shoes, are subject to what we know as the pink tax. Is it the same way in firefighting gear, Cassandra?
I don't think that there is. I think Meredith, are you? You're thinking about what I'm thinking, are you? Don't worry, I'm going to share it. Okay. So, from a cost perspective, I do not think so. I think the turnout suits are pretty much in line with each other, right, Meredith? Like if they, like some of the manufacturers who offer the female line versus the male.
Yes.
But it is funny though that you mentioned that, because when we were at our international conference that Meredith had mentioned earlier, we had this very nice gentleman who I think honestly had good intentions. He wasn't trying to be rude, and English was his second language. So, I think, he's doing the best that he could. But, he had just finished watching our presentation. And he asked us if he thought that maybe the turnout suits for female firefighters should be a different color. Like,
I 100% endorse this, and I want them to be pink. For breast cancer awareness a couple years ago, a local department got a few pink sets, and I was like, yes. Me too. But I
would wear it, but but it's
I was told no,
though, because I feel like the opinion there might be split, because we've encountered female firefighters who do not want to differentiate themselves from the male counterparts, and hell no, are they going to wear anything other than what their male counterparts are going to wear. So it was interesting though, like, on a more sort of global international platform that had come up, because I feel like in our studies that has actually never, like, I don't think it's even really entered our brain space on, the aesthetics, because right now we're so focused on, okay, how can we make sure that you guys are equal, including how it looks on you and making sure it fits, that that the whole marketing aspect of like color and like making it, quote unquote more feminine had never entered our space. So we were a little bit thrown off when he asked us that question. We were like,
make it all pink.
I was like, we actually haven't asked. I was like, I guess we could try to like sneak it into a survey, like, and just see.
I honestly don't think most females would have any interest in differentiating gear. I am just a big fan of pink. And so I'll take you back about 18 years into my career. I always tell people I am a big woman. I'm not as tall as Meredith though. Holy cow. I didn't know you were 6 feet tall. I'm a large woman, but a small firefighter. Mm-hmm. That said, we've hired a female firefighter that is much smaller than I am now, but I'm a large woman, but a small firefighter. And so it never occurred to me that the men in the station would borrow my things. And I came in one day, and one of the smaller men was wearing my running shoes because he forgot his. And he didn't see the problem with it. And I couldn't explain to him that there was a problem with it. So I took those running shoes, I threw them away, and I bought pink ones. Because ain't nobody gonna steal your pink shit. My headphones are pink. My phone charger has Hello Kitty on it.
I love it.
Well, that's just brilliant. I mean, that's just brilliant. That's
genius.
Like, do not wear my shit. Okay. So and I'm not sure which one of you is the one would be most appropriate to answer this. So give me a little hands up. and I'll call on you like kindergarten. But as a female firefighter who has known for years that my shit doesn't fit, who has had multiple foot surgeries, a hip surgery, and now a total knee replacement. And I know from a movement and physiological standpoint that those things, the shit that doesn't fit, are culprits. But how do we spread this message? Like who is shouting this message of the shit doesn't fit is causing injuries? Which one do you want to address that? All right, Meredith, you go, girl.
Yeah.
I'll take it, just because I was thinking earlier when you had asked another question, there is a stat out there that women in the fire service are 33% at 33% greater risk of injury. We know that. So women are already more predisposed to injury in the fire service, and a lot of that can be linked back and traced back to ill-fitting PPE, right? In terms of who's going to shout it right now, it's me and Cassandra, and there's another group that's great, Dr. Janke and Brittany Hollerback, and we're actually working with them. We're doing a symposium at IAFF next month. So if any of the listeners are at IAFF and we've got a couple sessions. If you want to come listen, we're happy to tell you more about it and more about the study and what we found. Because I think it's really important. And this awareness, that's one of the things I wanted to make sure I mentioned, is that like we really are passionate about spreading awareness, A, of the need, and B, of the options that are already out there. They may not be the best or the best they could be, but they're the best that's out there now. Like Cassandra said, in the focus groups and like listening to end users, when we're asking them, like, do you wear women's gear? And we had more than a handful of participants look at us and say, what do you mean women's gear? They didn't even know that it was an option to them, whether that's because, their department just isn't presenting that option to them, or their department maybe isn't even aware of that option themselves, or maybe it's a budget issue. But that was really our reasoning for bringing in the manufacturers. Was we didn't just want to figure out what are the problems for the end users. We need to also be able to fix those problems, right? And who's going to fix them? We're not manufacturers, so we need their buy-in too, right? And so they were really great partners to work with, and all of them, I would say every single manufacturer that we talked to in our study, they want, to meet the needs of all firefighters, including women, especially, and know the need is there, and how to best meet it is the question, right? But that was something that they talked about also, and from their challenges and barriers, from a marketing standpoint, that's huge, right? For them to get the profitability and get the market share, the end users need to know it's an option and that it's out there, right? And then that increases that consistent investment in that area and wanting to do continuous improvement, right? Those kinds of things. So it takes everybody coming to the table: manufacturers, end users, researchers, fire organizations like the NFPA, like AAFF, the standards bodies, right? And so that's where we're really focused on now, is analyzing this data to be able to take it to NFPA and say, look, we found in our study there were, out of the 14 plus measurements that's in the wildland firefighting standard, I would say at least 10 to 11 of those, we had a large majority of our participants that fell outside the sizing range, right? So like, it doesn't matter if you're an extra small, you can't get anything to fit you. It doesn't, like, they're assuming every female firefighter we scanned was an extra small, it wouldn't fit, right? It was too big. And we know not everyone is an extra small. So we've definitely got problems, right? Or it was too small, or vice versa. So being able to take that data and, make revisions to the standard is really important, because then manufacturers can take that and make change.
And that's incredible. And I'm embarrassed to admit, as someone who has suffered with ill-fitting gear for nearly 20 years now, I did not even know that some manufacturers made female gear until last fall when I was at the Women in Fire conference. So it was never offered, and I never thought to ask.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because in the same focus groups, when we had mentioned, because we really just wanted for people to tell us about their personal experiences with their gear. And I would say almost 100% of the participants who had women's size gear, which they did prefer, their second set was male. So it wasn't like both sets were female. Always one set was a male set, and then the other set was a female. And so they're like, well, I much prefer my female set over my male set, but you still own a male set of gear, right? So it's like,
Right.
it was
And
just
it's
so interesting.
constantly, now with the carcinogens and the cleaning after each run or each incident, they're wearing that as frequently as they are their best fitting set of gear. And also, we would be amiss if we don't mention that we did have a handful of participants who had women's gear, and it goes back to that fitting shape, not gender. They preferred their men's gear, right? So it's about how do we properly fit and size, right? And first of all, acknowledging those are two different things, right? And having an understanding of those two different things, properly training whether it's our sales rep, if it's maybe someone designated like a PPE officer in your department, whoever it is that's doing that selection and sizing, that everyone's as informed as they can be. And we're still learning. We learned so much from the manufacturers. We learned so much from the end users. And it was at probably not last fall, but the fall before, the Women in Fire Conference. So you weren't alone, because that's where we had, a handful of participants that were like, I didn't know there was women's gear, right? So getting that message out there, that's really important.
I'm going to be like a 3-year-old for a second before we talk about hands and feet, because I just thought of something we already talked about. When I asked you about the paint tax, I wonder if it's the manufacturers whose gear is already more expensive. So it's already, say, a higher echelon, if you will, of gear that include the female sizes. And so departments such as mine, which I think are very cost aware, are looking at lower end price points where the female gear maybe isn't available. Am I onto anything at all that you know of?
I think that is going to be in part correct.
Okay. Yeah, I have a feeling it is. I have a feeling it is.
Yes. I mean, Meredith and I, again, we weren't like trying to pick sides or anything. We started this research. We wanted everybody to be a partnership and collaborate, because that's the only way that you can really move the needle forward and just get change. But we reached out we try to get in touch with every single turnout gear manufacturer, like whether it was structural or wildland. We reached out to everybody, right, Meredith? A few of them didn't respond to us, unfortunately. But the ones that did, yes, are known to maybe be a little bit more innovative in that space, and do have sort of different product lines. And yes, I think are also more at the top end of the expense.
I would just add, your intuition there. That's correct. And what we find from some of those larger structural manufacturers in particular, typically is that, they're paving the way in innovation, not just in this space, but in every issue that's come out for the fire service, at least in the almost 15 years that I've been studying in this area. So, whether it was heat stress, which I've done a lot of work on, or whether it was ergonomic mobility, they've got a great design out there for that. They tackled the cancer issue, right, with particulate blocking, and they've tackled women as well. And so I think from our research and our understanding and our expertise, I would say, you probably are going to pay a higher price point for the women's gear that's done from the best innovative perspective of using a women's cut pattern and focusing on the things that really matter to get proper fit, if that makes sense. And so, with that innovation, with those patents, that there's a cost associated with that. And that's one thing we focused on and we've collected data on is, in all of our research, fire service or not, when you're doing product development, it has to be cost feasible. You can develop the best things since sliced bread, right? But if your end user, if you've priced your end user, they're out of the market, it doesn't matter, right? So it has to be reasonable. And so that's like with technology, the more that it's adopted, the more accessible it becomes. And that's what we hope that we see here, is that everyone will start doing it and start doing it from the right design approach, so that it's effective. And then there are multiple price point options available.
I feel good about my intuition because I can understand if a department, I can't remember how much a turnout set is now, 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is. If let's just pretend it's 3,000 and they have to get a different brand that's going to cost them $200 to $300 more to fit a female, I can see how they're like, well, that's not great. I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it, but I can see it. All right, I'm going to read. I was yesterday years old when I found out that NFPA also has a standard on sizing for boots. I'm going to read from a LinkedIn post. NFPA 1971 6.10.8.2, which requires full and half sizes in each of the 3 required widths shall be accomplished by individual and unique men's and women's lasts to provide proper fit. Dual sizing of the same pair of boots to cover men's and women's styles should not be acceptable. So a last, if I understand correctly, is simply a pattern for shoes. Am I right?
Well, it's a form.
It's a form. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And similarly to when we have a pattern that we are making gear from, it's specific. In other words, long story short, you can't just put me in a 6.5 and call it a women's 9 and call it good. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how do we, because is it the same thing? I know that you're probably not, or maybe I'm assuming wrong, but I'm assuming that you're not as entrenched in the shoe research as in the turnout research. Is that correct?
We, as of now, no, we're not. We are mainly focusing on the PPC, the clothing aspect of it. So what's actually worn on the body. But we are going to hopefully focus that, because we heard so much on gloves and boots and helmets, we hope to expand that research to include those, because again, it's all part of a system and they all interconnect. And so it's really important that we look at those interfaces as well. And I know Meredith has something to add.
Yeah, I'll just say, Cassandra and I, we wanted to tackle it all, right? And we realized boots alone could be a 3-year project. Gloves could be another 3-year project. But I will say, before we started this most recent project, I had the privilege to work with a multi-state research group, and there were some folks from, if you're aware of, if not, I can send you some stuff on. Dr. Hiju Park at Cornell has done a lot of work on firefighter boots and gait studies, and so he was a part of this group, and a couple of professors from Oregon and Minnesota. And so this was way back. Gosh, it's probably been 4 years ago now. We went down to Orlando, Orange County Fire Rescue Department. Chief Avery down there is wonderful, and she helped us with this project too, and she helped us back then, and she recruited all the female firefighters, and they came in, and we did hand and foot scans in that study for boots and gloves. And we've published a couple papers on the boots. We're working on the gloves, and all of it pretty much to say they're awful for women. They don't fit at all. And what Cassandra and I have we prefaced our focus groups with, like, we're going to keep our questions to protective clothing. If you get off, we'll bring you back. And I mean, we knew from the beginning that these ensemble elements were a problem, but it just confirmed, because we were constantly like, that's great. We're going to save that for the next project, but let's go back to the pant, or let's go back to the coat, because we really, I mean, that's what it all, there's certainly problems with the coat and the pant. Don't get us wrong. Our data has shown that. But I mean, I would say the biggest or bigger issues lie in the ensemble elements, from the SCBA harness to the helmet, to the glove, to the boots, all of it. I mean, it all needs serious improvement for, and like you said, it's not just for women, for all firefighters, but especially for women. Yeah.
And this NFPA document that I rattled off, do you know, does that cover station boots or only structural / wildland firefighting boots? Do you have any idea?
So that's NFPA 1971, correct?
Yes.
So that should be for structural only. I'm not sure how that applies to station boots, but that should be it was 1975. I know they're currently in the process of combining 71, 75, and there's another one too, isn't there, Cassandra? They're putting three
together, yeah.
Yeah, they're putting 3 into 1. It's going to be 1970, all for structural. They're doing the same thing with wildland. They're putting 77 together with the new cleaning standard, which is another thing I've been doing some research on in the wildland space. So, I love working with firefighters, and I always say they're good job security because there's never any shortage of issues with their PPE. There's always something we need to work on, which is, it's unfortunate, but we do our best to try to see those problems and meet those needs as soon as we can, and just hope we move the needle forward bit by bit.
Mm-hmm. And, granted, yes, there are big problems with the structural firefighting boots, but even on a really busy department, you're wearing primarily your station boots, not structural boots.
Right.
So that's been another one of my big gripes throughout my career. Well, I'm taking a look at the time here, ladies, and I want to be respectful because I know you are both busy. You both have families. So I want to start kind of winding down to 2 parts, or pick your own adventure. Was there a rabbit hole that we probably should have dived down and we didn't? So that's option 1. Or option 2, do you have some parting words for the listeners, some nuggets to leave them with? First off, rabbit hole or parting words? What's the vote?
I think I got through most of the rabbit holes and the things that I wanted to make sure I shared. What do you think, Cassandra? Parting words?
Yeah, I guess so. Because I was just thinking, I felt like I went on so many tangents anyways that were
the big things I wanted them to know that we shared. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So
I don't want to get too far in the weeds of it all.
Exactly.
Well, Cassandra, let's leave the mic with you then and give my listeners kind of your parting words or summary or whatever you would like to give them. The mic is yours.
Yeah, I guess first and foremost, thanks so much for having me and, being able to, speak to the listeners on this topic. It's like Meredith said, it's a really good group, and we've been very fortunate that everybody that we've spoken with and has sort of told our research about has been extremely enthusiastic and very supportive. So my hope is that continues. And that, if anybody, ever has a thought or a question, that they are able to reach out to us. Meredith and I get, emails and requests all the time, and we try to answer them, all, because we know that not every fire station department is the same. And even when I was doing so when we did body scanning during our research, I'm obviously based in North Carolina and in Raleigh. And so I kind of sent out, sort of a broadcast across the state. And truthfully, I was thinking, maybe I'll get some people that are like Durham, which is like, maybe 30 minutes away, or, some from the Cary department, which is like 15. Like, I was not expecting actually people who said, oh yeah, I drove in 2 hours to come do this 20-minute thing, so that right there in itself, I was like, wow, that was like, 1, you're helping me out tremendously, but 2, it matters. And I hope that, again, we continue to bring awareness to this issue and to educate. I think that's the biggest thing for me. So I'll just leave it there.
I think that is a fantastic summary, and I will put both of your contact information bits in the show notes. Turning the microphone over to Meredith. What do you have to say, my dear?
Yeah. So again, I just reiterate everything Cassandra said. Thanks for having us. And definitely if anyone's listening and they have any questions or they want to be involved, we're hoping to continue this study for another 3 years. Reach out to us. We're always happy to come to you if we can, or figure out a way to do something virtually, or, there's a lot of different technologies that we use that enable us to do things remotely. And so we're happy to get you involved and to do those things. I think from what we gathered from the end users and a lot of what we heard, I guess my encouragement to women in the fire service, again, totally not being a woman in the fire service, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think what a lot of our focus group participants left with was a renewed encouragement to vouch for themselves right? Which I'm sure in the fire service culture can be difficult, especially since a lot of our participants, a lot of them happen to be rookies, if you will, first year on the job, second year on the job. And so they said, we're already feeling like, we don't want to speak up. We don't want to cause any problems. And then in addition to, we've got this issue with our gear, we're not going to say anything. And we had one participant in particular, I'll never forget. She was issued gear. She went through training with it, and she got out to her first station. And the chief looked at her and he said, "What are you wearing?" And she said, "I went through training in this." And he said, "Absolutely not. You're putting yourself at danger. You're putting all of us at danger. We're going down and we're getting you a new set of gear." Right?
Bravo.
So advocate, right? Advocate for yourself and find advocates who will advocate for you. And just be persistent and spread the word, right? If you listen to this podcast, tell your male and female counterparts about this issue, so that, whether it's a man or a woman in the leadership position, they know that this women's gear exists and that there's a need for it.
I'm going to say it again, bravo, because as a rookie firefighter, and even as a 20-year veteran, I am guilty of this. In fact, I just talked about this at a women's leadership conference. I would ask for what I needed, but when I was told no, I dropped it. Mm-hmm. And women and men, if you have issues with your gear, you need to ask for what you need, and you need to keep asking until the problem is solved. As Meredith said, you're putting yourself, your crew, your family, the people that depend on you, you're putting them all in danger when you're wearing gear that doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm going to put the ladies' contact information in the show notes. Meredith, if there's any diagrams, you mentioned a couple, any diagrams or links to papers, go ahead and send those to me and I'll make sure those get in the show notes. And I think with that, we can officially drop the mic and say Cassandra, Meredith, and AZ are officially out.